Hello, Vesta. We'll just wait a few more seconds till people jump on. Welcome to the Stampin' Piece Studio. I am Mary Knabe, coming to you from Columbus, Ohio. Today is Friday, May 12th. So I hope you've had a great week. I've had a pretty good week. Spent a little time outside in my yard, but I had a very productive week here in the Stampin' Piece Studio. And all week long, I've been sharing projects featuring the Earthen Elegance Suite, which is in our new annual catalog on pages 70, 71. I hope you all have been enjoying our new catalog. If you are somebody that is not currently working with a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I would love to earn your business, and I'd be happy to send you a complimentary catalog. All you have to do is go to stampinpiece.com and click Contact Me and request a catalog, and I'll get that right out to you. Hi there, Margaret. Okay, once again today, we will be focusing on the Earthen Elegance Suite. So this is the third of a three-part series of Facebook Lives. On Monday's Facebook Live, we went from simple stamping to stepped up, and then to even more stepped up cards. And on Wednesday's Facebook Live, we used the suite in an entirely different way. Instead of focusing so much on the stamps, we focused mainly on the die cuts and the beautiful designer series paper. And what I did was showed you how to mix and match the colors, the textures, the designs of the designer series paper and put them together to make one-of-a-kind cards. So that was a lot of fun. I have to think for a second. Okay, the first one is up on the blog, and this one will be up on my blog, stampinpiece.com, a little bit later this afternoon, putting the finishing touches on that post. So let's get started with today's cards. I'm very excited to show you this so that I can introduce a stamping technique to you and combine it with this wonderful product suite. While I'm flipping my camera around to my workspace, would you please be so kind as to share this live video and invite others to join us for today's creative inspiration. All right, today we'll be making 3 cards. Be sure to stay till the end because I'm going to give you a word to type in the comments to have your name entered into the drawing for each of today's cards. Let me straighten this out a little bit more. Okay, so each of the cards is basically going to be a card on white with tones of one shade of color. So each of the cards will feature one of these colors: Misty Moonlight, Pretty Peacock, and Moody Mauve. So for the first one, I'm going to focus on Misty Moonlight. And each of these cards, the technique, I'll be using the small blending brushes. For this technique, you can use your large blending brushes. If you have those, they will work just fine as well. So I've got all my pieces and parts here. Oh, I can't get them out of the envelope though. Don't know. There we go. So I'm starting with a piece of basic white cardstock, and this measures 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And I'm going to grab a smaller grid paper to use as my scrap paper. And I've already been practicing this technique and using it for other things for myself this week. So what I've done is cut some templates from dies. So each of these pieces of cardstock started out being 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. I've used one of the layering circle dies, and I've used 2 sizes of the deckled rectangle dies. And I'm using these negative pieces once I've die cut as stencils. So what I'm going to do is just put the stencil right over my basic white cardstock. And then I'm just going to blend some color on. When you're using your blending brushes and you're picking up color, just very, very lightly, okay? Just pick up that color lightly. You don't want to press and push your brush into the ink pad. And always start brushing off on the side. See how that's pretty intense? I want it a little softer. And then I move on to the area that I want to put color on. I'm just going to keep going round and round and round. You do it as long as you want until you get the shade that you desire. I want to keep it fairly light. I also want to make sure I've got all of those edges done well. So once I've done that, I'm going to pick up my stencil, and this is what I have left. Something on there. So now I'm going to build my card from this. I've got some stamps laid out. I'm going to use this one first. I'm basically just doing some simple stamping on here. I want to stamp this one on. This one I tend to get the edge of that stamp. I even trimmed the rubber down a bit because I was pressing a little too hard. Okay. So if you've got a heavy hand, think of it that way. Kind of practice on some scrap paper first. And then just kind of hold it in place. Oops, I still got some there. Darn it. But I'm going to keep going nonetheless. So now I want to add a sentiment. Again, if you want to use some grid paper to practice stamping straight, do that. And then this is the basis of my card. So now let's put this simple stamping card together. I'm going to adhere this. Oh, Lori, you're late to playing with your grandbaby. That is a great reason to be late. And in fact, if after early July, I'm late to a Facebook Live, it might be for the same reason. I can hardly wait. Less than 8 weeks now. And then I'm going to add that. And because I made this boo-boo, I'm trying to think, what can I do? What can I put there to minimize that? I wonder if there's, well, I think I know what I can do. Let's do this. Thanks to all of you who are here watching live, and thank you for sharing as well. I do appreciate you. What I'm going to do is just stamp a portion of this. And I'm using this Post-it note to put the ink just on the main top part. Probably pressed a little hard. Tap, tap. And I'm going to remove that Post-it note. And then I'm just going to kind of try to line that up. Oh, that works. That works, and I'm happy with that result. So don't ever get discouraged when you make a mistake, because the wonderful thing about this craft is you can usually find a way to disguise that mistake, just as I did there, that little bit of overstamping. You could do a bow, you could do some kind of embellishment, you could add just a little strip of cardstock or DSP, sort of like as a an element of your card. So that worked out well. I'm pleased with that. Okay, so there's card number 1 with that stamping technique. Now I'm using the same technique, but changing it up a bit. With how I add the focal point and the sentiment. So once again, I'm starting with 5" by 3 3/4 inch piece of white cardstock. I've already made my template or my stencil, and bringing some scrap paper back in. I would advise that when you use the sticky notes to hold your stencil in place, that you still are holding it in place with your fingers as well, just to make sure there's no shifting involved. So now I'm working with Pretty Peacock. Both Misty Moonlight and Pretty Peacock were previous in colors that have returned and are now part of our core collection of colors. Remember, you always want to start off of the area that you'll be adding color to. I like to go around the outside edges a few times when I'm using stencils like this, just to be sure that I got right up to the edge. It's pretty easy, but I do like to pay close attention to that part. Then I'm going to pull up my stencil, and I have this right in the center. And now I'm going to build the other elements of the card around this, using this as my focal point. So, and I don't have to die cut this. If you were with me on Wednesday, I said I had everything die cut, and it came to put the second card together, and I didn't have this, so I die cut it, and as soon as I finished, there it was hiding up here in the corner. And I know Tony and there was somebody else trying to tell me it was there. But I kind of was camouflaged, I'll say, in the flowers of my grid paper. So I'm putting this here right as my focal point. So instead of stamping a sprig or a focal point as I did on the first card, I'm using a single die cut for that. Now I'm going to stamp my sentiments. And once again, I like to pull in my grid paper just to see if I'm lining it up pretty straight. Okay. It's always a little trickier when I've got the camera in my way. Because I'm trying to look over the top of the stamp, but yet keep my head out of the viewing frame. All right, I'm very satisfied with that. So for this card, I'm going to mount this stamped white cardstock on top of a piece of white cardstock just slightly larger. So this second piece measures 5 1/8 by 3 7/8 inches. And when I get this video replay onto my blog, I will have photos of each card with the cutting dimensions of each card. That's why I often direct people to stampinpiece.com rather than just my YouTube channel. If you just want the video, that's great. If you want the extra information, all the cutting dimensions, Stampin' Up! Products used listed for you, that's the place to go, stampinpiece.com. It's my website and blog. All right, and I'm going to put this on a pretty peacock card base. And because I'm keeping things pretty simple with this, it's a simple technique. And I don't want to take away from that by adding too much. So believe it or not, I'm not using any Stampin' Dimensionals on these first two cards. Everything is laying flat. And of course, I want to add basic white to the inside for writing messages. Having that light neutral color inside makes it very easy for you to write your messages or to do additional stamping. Plus, being on white or a very light neutral light color, it makes it easier for the recipient of your card to read your message. All right, so card number 2 is complete. And now I have one more. And in this one, we will be doing some die cutting. And we're going to use that pretty wavy trim as well. But this card will feature the Moody Mauve color. So let me put this away. Out of the way, I should say, and bring in Moody Mauve. This is one of our newest in colors, so it will be around for 2 years. So once again, I previously die cut this stencil or template from another size of the deckled rectangle dies. So on this card, I wanted to have a larger area of color. And if for some reason you are doing this technique and you want the shade of your color even darker, you just add more ink to your brush and work another layer of ink onto that section. Using these blending brushes just adds a really nice softness to the look. It's like you can see some texture in it, but it's a very soft looking texture. Oops, got an edge right there. You see that? I didn't have my stencil lined up perfectly with that. So all I'm going to do is just cut off that slightest little bit, which is easy to do with our Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer because it is so precise. So now I'm going to add this to another piece of the white cardstock. This measures also 5 1/8 by 3 7/8, just like that white layer on the previous card. So now let's do a little die cutting. I want to move my ink out of the way for a bit. And bringing in my pretty boho blue mini machine. And let's see, we're cutting out a few things here. So I'm going to start by cutting out the stoneware pieces. And I'm also going to cut this fancy design from this designer series paper. And I've already cut that. And the last one you'll see shortly. So I'm going to be cutting 3 stoneware or earthenware vases in total. But on this card, it is definitely more stepped up than simply doing simple stamping. Look how nicely that cuts. It was so easy. And lastly, because I want you to see what this one die does. Okay, we have this. This does not cut out at all. This simply leaves an embossed impression on your cardstock. So what I'm going to do, and you can do it either direction, you can emboss your cardstock with this first and then die cut, or you can die cut and then emboss with this. And I tried both. They both work. I just felt like I liked it better this way, where I die cut first and then embossed. I feel like the impression was just a little bit more evident when I did it like this. Put my dies where I won't lose them. And I'm just going to set this pretty much in the center of that pot. Okay, and be ready to be amazed. When I first saw this, I thought, what is that die supposed to be doing? And then I did it, and I was like, ooh, love it. And I'm going to use a Post-it note because this wants to slide around. Sure it's right where I want it. That looks pretty good. Do that. Okay, that's better. here it is. Be prepared to be amazed. Look at the texture on that. Is that gorgeous or what? It just leaves like an indentation of that scallop ropey look. So super pretty, super pretty. And I am going to put the die cut handles or topper on this. And I was hoping somebody would remind me at the end of the last Facebook Live. Remember, for some reason, we were talking about, I guess I used the silicone mat, and some of you said you had it and others did not. Many of you did not comment that you had it, but I wanted to show you why it's such a wonderful thing. So the purpose of the silicone mat is to protect your work surface from getting all sticky and icky and gluey and whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to press this down, and any any glue that's on the opposite side will come off on my mat, but that's okay. I want it here rather than any place else. And why? So in that Facebook Live, I just took some multi-purpose glue and smeared it on my silicone mat. And I said, don't let me forget at the end to show you how easy it is to clean. Well, I forgot. I didn't get reminded. So look at this. This is all dried multi-purpose glue. And then here in these two spots, I put some of my Stampin' Seal, right? Sometimes we're trying to get our adhesive on maybe a narrow piece or something like that, and we use too much. Look at this. It just peels right off. Anything on here just peels right off. Whether it be new or old, as long as it's dry, it peels right off. Now, the other great thing for this, how many of you own a glue gun? Hands up. How many of you own a glue gun? Yes. In fact, I have another one of these that I keep with my glue gun and the glue sticks, because same thing, you rest your glue gun on here, that hot glue will drip. All you have to do is kind of brush it off, roll it off. It'll literally pick up. If you have a blob of hot glue, it just pulls off easily. So this is something I highly recommend for all crafters. All right, now we've got to put all of these things together. Oh, I need this again. I'm going to adhere this to the plain earthenware vase. Just going to go right across the middle here, kind of centering it. It doesn't have to be centered. You could put it higher or lower. And then I'm just going to trim away the excess. Now, I did this by die cutting DSP. You could die cut a different DSP. You could die cut a different color of cardstock. There's no limit to the things you can do. Now, this looks a little too plain. I was going to use it plain, and I thought, nope, I need to do something more with it. So this is what I'm doing. I'm putting some adhesive on the back side, and this is where I'm bringing in that pretty wavy trim. And you know, this really, I thought it might be kind of thick, but it's not. It's actually very thin to work with. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tuck the end behind. And then I'm just kind of wrapping, but when I come to the front, I am leaving a space between the rows of the trim, the wavy trim. I think it shows off the wavy trim better if we've got some space between the rows. So that's why I chose to do it this way. When I made my first sample, I did have all the rows kind of squished together, and it was okay. But then when I tried it this way, I liked it better. So you might want to try both ways as well and see which you like better. So now I'll just trim that off along the back. And I'm just going to put some adhesive over those strands, but I am going to put some dimensionals on the top and bottom of that vase. So the thickness here of the braided trim, the wavy trim, is approximately the same height as these mini dimensionals. So that will kind of even things out. And that wavy trim should not come loose because of the adhesive I put behind. So I'm going to lay that there. And then I want to arrange my other two pots. I think that looks pretty good. This taller one, I'm going to lay flat. And this shorter one thing I was going to mention about this too, you can trim any of these down to make them shorter. For example, I could trim it off. I could trim it right here even and just have that much, okay? Same thing with this tall vase. If you didn't want it quite that tall, go ahead and trim it. Or if you just wanted like a short little bowl piece of stoneware or earthenware, you can trim it down like that. All right. It doesn't have to, they don't have to remain the sizes that you're die cutting. Okay. And finally, I do want to add a sentiment to this card as well. And I'm adding with gratitude. What happened to my little, here's my scrapbook paper. Once again, I just kind of line it up with my grid paper to see, almost straight. Come down on the left a little bit. All right. And I'm going to put this right in here. Awesome. So what do you think? So with all of these cards, you can see that I used, in addition to the stamping technique, I incorporated different ways to use the stamps and the dies with this stamping technique. And I've kept all three of the cards tone on tone, right? Kept them tone on tone by using just one color of ink pad. All right, who owns blending brushes? Large and or small? Anybody? Who owns the blending brushes? If you own the blending brushes, I want you to die. Oh, and by the way, you don't just have to die cut. If you've got a fairly large punch shape that you want to try, I'm trying to think, we've got some circles. How about, if you wanted this as your focal point, use that for your template. The bunny, which I think is back in stock, but you could do that with the bunny. Punch it out and then have a bunny template to use, which would be really cute. So if you have the blending brushes, please, please, please give this Stampin' technique a try and share what you make. Share it right here on Stampin' Piece with Mary Knabe. I'm always interested in what your take is on what has been shared with you. And there's never a right or wrong. It's just about sharing and inspiring each other. And trust me, I get inspiration from all of you, just like you do from me. So I love it when you share. The other thing is, if you don't have the blending brushes, of course, I highly suggest you get them because I love them. You can also use sponges or sponge daubers for the same effect. When you shade with those other tools, things look a little different, but you get a very similar effect, okay? So there are some other options. You can still go ahead and try this technique, even if you don't have the blending brushes, okay? So all stamping, stamp with one die cut, and some, what do I want to say? On these two, I just stamped the sentiments, and the rest was die cut. So a lot of fun. It's a very easy technique. Anybody can do this. If you work with children or even people that may have trouble with their hands, maybe arthritis or something like that, they too can use those blending brushes to create these beautiful focal points. All right. Are there any questions about this technique, about the Earthen Elegance suite and its products? I'm going to quickly scroll, and then I'll give you today's word. Okay, I think that was it. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed today's cards. I will choose 3 lucky winners to each receive one of these cards. If you would like to have your name entered into the drawing to receive one of these cards, please type in the comments now, blending brushes, right? I used a blending brush for each, okay? Blending brushes. Also, when you have the blending brushes, I have, let's see, I think I have 3 sets of each. And what I do is you don't necessarily need a different brush for every different color, right? Who wants 50 blending brushes? What I do is I have a red, one for reds, one for yellows, one for blues, one for greens, one for pinks. I have one for purples, for browns. All right. And that's how I use my blending brushes. And you also do not need to wash them every time you use them. What you should do is remove the color, just like that. Just because, since I'm using it with, say, lighter and darker greens, I want to get as much of that ink off as I can. And I just do that before I put them away. Now, after lots and lots of use and a lot of time, you may see where ink is getting way down close to the base. That's a sign to me that it's probably a good time to rinse these out. To clean these, First of all, you cannot clean them and use them soon after. It takes a long time for them to dry. So, for example, I know that I am not going to be crafting this evening. I'm going to Andrea and John's for dinner and to see the baby's room. So I know I won't be crafting, and I know I won't be using these. So a good thing for me to do now is take them to the sink, rinse them with cold water. That's all you have to do. I do not use any soap or detergents at all, just cold water. Let the ink run out, and then I lay them on a towel. Give them just a gentle squeeze to get rid of any excess water, but then you just let them air dry, okay? You just let them air dry after that. So super easy, and again, you don't have to worry about cleaning them with water, rinsing them with water after each use. It's just not necessary. But it is helpful to have a couple of sets so that you can have one designated for each basic color, like the reds, the blues, the yellows, the greens, etc. Okay? All right, I hope you've enjoyed today's Facebook Live. I will be back on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And then after that Facebook Live, you won't see me for a couple of weeks live, at least not live. I'm trying to get some posts together on stampinpiece.com, but you won't see me doing any lives with creative demonstrations because Emily and I are leaving for London on Wednesday, and then we get on the Stampin' Up! Incentive trip, the Norwegian Fjords cruise. So excited about that. And yes, I started packing already. In fact, I can't wait. I can't wait. London has always been on my bucket list. So when I heard this cruise was leaving from England, I said to Emily, we've got to add on days. We've just got to add on days at the beginning. So I'm super excited. I can't wait. Just counting the time until we leave next week. So I will look for you back here on Stampin' Piece with Mary Knabe on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be the 15th. And then I'll be gone for a couple weeks and back at the very end of May. Also on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I have my free online craft and chat evening. We go online at 7 p.m. Eastern Time by Zoom. We just introduce ourselves. We get to know each other a little bit, and we all work on our own projects. So it's sort of like giving yourself permission to set aside an hour and a half on the third Monday of each month to craft. And we get to craft with others. We may not be in person, but doing it by Zoom and being able to connect and have conversation with one another while we each do our own craft really is fun, really is fun. So I hope you'll join me for that as well. And I'll be posting the Zoom link. All right, everybody, have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you soon. Happy stamping.